And I knew things were kind of bad, but I didn't realize just how bad they were because we don't get the actual sales data. But I have a friend in the industry that actually has contacts at both Penguin Random House and Lunar and knows the actual numbers. And they were able to share with me some of the numbers, especially for the top Marvel titles, specifically Amazing Spider-Man and One World Under Doom, and they are absolutely terrifying. Marvel Comics are in far more trouble than I ever actually imagined once you start looking at these numbers, and I'll get to them here in a second, but also kind of indirectly, but gives you a good idea that DC, while they're certainly doing better and they are closing the gap, they're not exactly selling like gangbusters. I've been told specifically that there isn't an ongoing series in all of comic books whose orders exceed 100,000. I've long suspected there at the end of the Chip Zdarsky Batman run that those sales might have actually dipped below 70,000, maybe getting closer to 60,000. And while I have not confirmed that, I will put that out there, I think I was pretty right. I think that's about where they were, maybe to 65 to 70,000, maybe even a little bit less than that. Looking at the numbers that I do have for Amazing Spider-Man in May of 2025, so that's only issues 3 and 4 come out in May. Right after Reboot, we know that ASM #1 was the best-selling comic book in April, but apparently it was completely boosted up by variant covers, and the sales just bottomed out, and ASM at issue 3 or 4 was already down to 48,000 orders through comic book shops. And then the big event, One World Under Doom, the big Fantastic Four event that's got the Avengers in it, it's got all these miniseries and everything, a big summer event for Marvel Comics, the orders are at 40,000 in May. That is bad. That's way worse than I anticipated, especially for ASM. I assumed ASM was over 55, closer to 60,000, and it's under 50,000. It's 48,000. And One World Under Doom being at 40,000 is just a complete catastrophe. And I'm going to demonstrate this here. We're going to go through the last 10 years of actual sales data that we do have and show you where these numbers go in comparison to ASM, other Marvel events, and really demonstrate that while, yes, things have gotten better, the indie scene is hot, there's good stuff on the indie scene, I'm liking what DC are doing, the sales just aren't there. There's something really, really wrong here. So let's get into some of these sales rankings and then get into the actual concrete sales data we have for 10 years and kind of explain what this really all means. So since the pandemic has happened and Diamond unilaterally shut everything down and Lunar came on board, we haven't gotten actual concrete sales data. The best information that we do have regarding the popularity of comic books and how they're doing are these ICV2 rankings based on Comics Hub, and they are basically just based on sales to customers from a very limited sample size of stores. I believe it's about 120 worldwide. So this isn't the greatest piece of information that we do have, but it does give us a general idea of what's popular and what's not popular and what's selling the most and what's not. And we can see that once we get to May of 2025, when we had the 48,000 sales, Amazing Spider-Man clocks in at number 6 at 48,000. And then we see One World Under Doom at 40,000 is a top 10 book based on actual sales from Comics Hub to customers, not exactly completely indicative of sales to comic book retailers worldwide. But this gives us an idea that amongst sales to customers, these were at least top 10 books for the month of May. And the fact that we're clocking in at 48,000 and 40,000 is very, very bad. These should be in the 30s and 40s, perhaps even outside the top 50, even in times that weren't exactly good back in the day, which we're going to discuss right here. So we're going to go back to Comic-Con, which houses the actual sales data from Diamond to comic book retailers when they were Monopoly, all the way up to about 2018, 2019. We're going to go 10 years back and look at just how bad these sales numbers are. Spider-Man being at 48,000, One World Under Doom being at 40,000. And trust me, the One World Under Doom thing is probably more revelatory when it comes to just how bad things are right now. But going back to 2019, the last time for a May sales month that we had complete sales data, we're looking for Amazing Spider-Man. It was the number 10 selling book, clocking at about 78,000 units. That's during the Nick Spencer run And if we look for any type of events that are going on, War of the Realms is going on. And it's not doing very well on issue number 3 at 73,000. And just think about this, ASM is on issue 22. The one we're talking at like 48,000 is on issue 3 or 4. The fact that it's died so rapidly is absolutely shocking stuff. Even when comparing to a not great sales year in 2019, you go back to 2019, you start looking at some of these books. We had Deceased, Doomsday Clock. That first issue of Batman Last Night on Earth was an absolute banger. Savage Avengers was actually a pretty decent book. Immortal Hulk, this is before the issue 25 disaster, was still a great book at this time. Yeah, we still got Venom going on. Going to 2018, which a lot of people say, this is way better than it was in 2018. Are you sure about that? We go back and we start looking for Amazing Spider-Man. This was a milestone issue, issue 800, 400,000. You got to kind of throw that one out there. But that's very, very healthy stuff to see a 400,000 in there. I don't think there's a big Marvel event going on. I believe it's the only May that there is an event going on. But we do have Venom #1, the Donny Cates run. We've got Doomsday Clock still going on at that point of time. This is before Batman 50, and it really fell off the cliff with what Tom King did to really destroy that one. You can see the Star Wars books are doing very well, especially Star Wars Darth Vader. Star Wars doing absolutely phenomenal, both over 50,000. And you start seeing where that 48,000 would go in. In 2019, ASM would have been like the 28th best-selling book. One World Under Doom, the big event book, would have been more like number 40. You go back to 2017, Secret Empire, the big Marvel event, 157,000 sales. Now, that's a healthy number, even if Secret Empire isn't fondly remembered. You actually have to go all the way down to about issue 27, Amazing Spider-Man, not in a good place. The end of the Dan Slott run, still not at 48,000, though. Still at 51,000 after, 8 years of Dan Slott? Almost as poor as it's doing right now on issue 3 or 4 of this ASM reboot. And you could see it would have slotted in as a top 30 book, but certainly not a top 10 book. And then One World Under Doom would have slotted in right as like a top 50 book, where it should be instead of a top 10 book. This just kind of shows you, even going back to 2017 when things weren't all that great and things weren't going very well, the sales were still dominant compared to what ASM and One World Under Doom are doing now. 2016, the big event is Civil War II. Once again, 175,000 units moved. DC Universe Rebirth, 235,000. Amazing Spider-Man, still healthy at 75,000. And look at the amount of books over 100,000. We got 4 books over 100,000. One of them just under that at Captain America Steve Rogers. Can you imagine a Captain America Steve Rogers book debuting with 100,000 issues these days? It might be able to happen, but they would have to bring back every major artist to do a cover that they have access to just to get those numbers. Look at Star Wars, almost 20 issues in, still close to 100,000. Don't tell me today is better than it was in 2018, 2016, or things are healthier. They absolutely aren't. The numbers do not lie. ASM, 48,000. One World Under Doom, the big summer event, 40,000. Let's go back to 2015. The big event is Secret Wars. Issue 1, over 500,000. Issue 2 of Secret Wars, over 200,000. Star Wars, early on in the run, well over 100,000. We have 10 books over 100,000 just in 2016. This isn't even a decade ago. DC event conversions, right around 100,000. Amazing Spider-Man, 88,000. Things are not nearly as healthy as you would like to imagine, and things are far worse than even I imagined. Going back to 2014 in May, we've got an event from Marvel, Original Sin, issue #1, almost 150,000. Not quite as much interest there. We got ASM coming off of another reboot, both over 100,000. And then even a DC event, Forever Evil, close to 100,000. Back in May of 2013, we've got Age of Ultron, close to 100,000, 7, 8 issues in. We've got Superior Spider-Man, because there is no ASM. It's been replaced by Superior Spider-Man. One of them's 93,000, the other one's 85,000. May of 2012, nobody likes Avengers versus X-Men at all. 3, 4 issues in, well over 175,000. Amazing Spider-Man, not doing well at 58,000, 10,000 units more than what Amazing Spider-Man is doing right now. Are we sure that things are so healthy right now and things are going well? Because there's a couple of readable books at Marvel Comics, and DC is on the rise. Marvel Comics is the market leader. The market goes as Marvel Comics goes. Marvel Comics is in a terrible state. They can't sell 50,000 units of Amazing Spider-Man on issue number 3. Going back to May 2011, Fear itself, close to 100,000. You can see nothing topping 100,000. So obviously not a great year when it comes to 2011, but still far better than what we're doing right now. Amazing Spider-Man, close to 60,000. That 48,000 number in a bad year would have made it a top 25 selling book at number 24, and that 40,000 number would have slipped it into the top 35. May of 2010, we've got a Marvel event, Siege, over 100,000. We've got Amazing Spider-Man down here, not doing great, still at 58,000, but it was a steady seller at 58,000. This was probably as low as you could go there for quite some time. The numbers do not lie. Yes, things are getting better. There's no doubt about it. DC is doing better, but without Marvel leading the way, the industry itself is going to have to change the way people think about comic books if they want to start thinking about DC being the number one publisher, because that's not what has driven the industry for 4 or 5 decades at this point. ASM being at under 50,000 orders at issue number 3, issue number 4 is an enormous, and I do mean enormous, red flag. One World Under Doom, the big Doom-led summer event for Marvel Comics that's going to go all the way to the end of the year, being down at 40,000 is an even more enormous red flag that things are not well, that Marvel is in far more trouble, and therefore the entire comic book industry is in more trouble than even I had imagined. Do I think Absolute Batman, the Absolute Universe, can carry the industry through a year? A bad year? Yeah, but not a good year. I don't think it can lead the industry for the next 5 years or decade. They need Amazing Spider-Man. You need Marvel Comics to carry the industry. Batman cannot do it alone. You would need Superman to all of a sudden become a perennial best-selling comic book. That has not happened even with Josh Williamson. And I'm sure you saw the numbers on Flash. Those Flash sales when he was on Flash during Rebirth were absolutely annihilating. The sales that we're even getting on Batman comics these days. Now, we don't have all the official numbers, unfortunately, but I do know nothing is selling over 100,000. ASM is a top 10 book at 48,000, way below where it should be. One World Under Doom, the big summer event, is a top 10 book, selling only 40,000. And you can see by the numbers that we did have when we thought the industry wasn't doing great then, that it's doing even worse now. And it's unfortunate because things have gotten better, but DC is not as good as it was during Rebirth. Let's not kid ourselves here. DC is not as hot as it was during the initial days of the New 52. They have a lot of work to do, and they continue to make bad decisions, which I'll cover, here within the next couple of days. Now, Marvel does have a plan to get people excited about ASM. I think it's a bad plan, but let's talk about it. Starting in September of 2025, Amazing Spider-Man launches a bold new era under writer Joe Kelly and artist Pepe Larraz and John Romita Jr. with the landmark 975th issue, or ASM number 11, introducing 2 Spider-Men, one Earthbound and one Cosmic, following a shocking split triggered by Peter Parker's battle with the new supervillain Hellgate. This long-term storyline, teased since February, blends grounded Manhattan tales with fish out of water space adventures, featuring a new yellow symbiote with a tech vibe dubbed Symbi, and kicks off the countdown to the monumental Amazing Spider-Man number 1000. I remember when they split up Superman and made Superman red and blue, and I remember that not exactly going well and not liking it. Does that get anyone excited? Are you ready to go there and support ASM every single month now that he's going to be 2 different characters, one Earthbound and one Cosmic bound? This ASM run is not getting very many people excited, and it's with one of their top 3 artists. Pepe Larraz has been on the book, and it's not doing well, and I don't think that's the answer. I think you actually have to revamp the character and be focused and committed to salvaging Peter Parker and letting him grow as a character instead of basically keeping him in a state of arrested development. I'll talk about that later today. Donny Cates was saying the exact same thing. And it's absolutely ridiculous what they've done to Amazing Spider-Man. And it's absolutely ridiculous what Marvel Comics have done really to the entire industry, holding them hostage with their own incompetence and terrible quality that they're putting out there that is driving people away. There's better quality now than there was 2 years ago, no doubt about it. But unfortunately, the sales have not followed that trend. Things do not appear to be going up. Things actually appear to be stagnating or going down. Unfortunately, and we need a fix action for this. We need to salvage it, but I can't do that. You can't do that. Marvel Comics under Dan Buckley, C.B. Cebulski, and Tom Brevoort have to do that. But I think at this point, those men are absolutely incapable of doing that. And I don't think DC Comics under Jim Lee's lackluster leadership is ready to lead the industry out of this quagmire that they found themselves in of basically controlled decline. Just admitting it's always going to go down and there's nothing we can do about it, but we're going to try to maintain sales levels using gimmicks rather than investing in the quality of the product and telling people now is the time to come back because we are back and we're going to deliver better stories today than we ever have. They are not committed to quality. They are not committed to excellence. They are committed to selling comic books as collectibles. And that is essentially the entire marketing strategy of Marvel Comics these days. And you can see it in the sales numbers for ASM, One World Under Doom. It is not working. Things are worse than anybody probably could have imagined. If you appreciate this kind of no-nonsense, honest perspective, honest coverage of comic books, which we need more now today than ever, and you would like to support that mission, help us keep the lights on, the videos flowing forward, and keep the truth alive in comic books and what's really going on and trying to save all this stuff, there's one place to do that. Become part of the family. Support us at Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. There's a button right here. I do hope to see you there very, very soon.